So welcome back to the Diver Guy channel. If you want to learn how to become an expert at back 1.5 tuck, then you've come to the right place. I really wish that I had something like this when I was growing up, so I'm doing it for you. So I'm going to take you through the evolution of learning it for the first time, and then what to think about along the way so that you can make it look really good, like these experts that we're going to talk about. All right, so let's start with this guy right here. It's his first back 1.5 tuck. Early on in this dive progression, you're probably going to be young, but if you're starting later, that's totally fine. You'll probably be able to move the board a little bit more than this young guy, but he still generates a lot of flip speed because he's throwing his head back and because he's using his shoulders a lot. He does a good job bringing up his legs for the tuck, and I bet he sees the board on his out, and it doesn't look like he's really spotting yet, but that's totally fine at this stage. This is really the first optional that you'll learn with a blind entry, so I know how nerve-wracking it can be. You have to trust your spots, and you have to trust your lead-ups. Your backflip tucks, if you can see the water in the board when you come around, then you know you're going to make it. But the big takeaway here is that on this takeoff, you see his upper body is almost parallel with the water and he just left the board, which means he's really leaning back a lot, and you can see he's already looking back with his head. So ideally on the takeoff, you want to be looking back towards the board, and that's something that you're going to see as we get further and further along in a diving career and as you get more comfortable doing this dive. All right, so the second video also seems like more of a beginner with this dive. This guy seems like he's kind of tight in his shoulders. You can see as he's oscillating up for that last jump, he doesn't really extend up towards 12 o'clock or towards the ceiling. His arms are kind of wide, and that usually leads to an early arm circle like he does right here. So his arms start a downward motion too early, and then he stops them at the bottom before really swinging them up again. This is going to be a big unlock for you if you can take away the shoulder movement from the arm circle. And what I mean by that is, if you're just standing still and you're doing arm circles, think about how much you can use momentum and gravity to make the arms swing. If you're trying to generate more momentum and using the muscles in your shoulder to get your arms to come up during the arm circle, then you're going to be connecting, which means as your arms come through, you start to move at the same time with the shoulders and the arms, which leads to falling back and away, kind of like this guy right here. So obviously that makes him a little bit back off the board, which will lead to a loss of control on the entry typically. All right, up to 3 meters we go, and we see a little bit of misalignment on the board work here. As her arms come up, she crow hops, and you'll see the knees move forward as the hips slide back slightly. It's just showing a little bit of instability in the core, and you really just want to think about having vertical motion on these oscillations. If you can just be up and down a little bit smoother, and then only really change that position as you're going into that squat, into that final squat, that'll really help. Her arm swings a little bit early, like we've talked about in previous videos. You really want to wait longer to swing the arms through so that you can generate a little bit more momentum off the board or up into the air. The first major point was the head position. You really want to keep your eyes down on the board, like this girl right here. You can tell on the takeoff where she's looking based off of her head position. Her chin is kind of tucked in a little bit more, her arms are back, and her gaze is back towards the board. It might be on that back wall, it might be on the board in front of her, but that's a much better head position on a takeoff. Once you really got that locked in, the taller you can be on the board and not letting the knees bend first, because you want to allow the hips to slide in slightly towards the board on the takeoff as opposed to the knees bending. You can see on her takeoff, she leans back a little bit, but the knees are bending before she's really left the board enough. So really thinking about finishing the jump all the way through straight knees and then driving up into the tuck will really help on that takeoff. And next up, we'll really talk about this kick out. As you grow up and as you get better at diving, you'll spend more time in the air relaxing and coming out into a flatter position before looking back. When she kicks out, the arms and legs kind of move at the same time, so it's just a little bit rushed. She goes in pretty straight, great job. And now this next video will really show you a little bit more about what I meant on the takeoff of letting the hips slide in more, and then you'll see a really nice kick out for the entry. Check out this position at the end of the takeoff where his legs are straight, he's got a nice C position, and the hips are almost the most forward part of his body. His toes are a little bit in front. You'll have to lean back a little bit, but that's a really nice position off the board. Once the board really finishes pushing a little bit more, you'll want to bring up the knees. I think he lifts his feet up a little bit early. What he can really work on is looking into the tuck a little bit more. You'll see in the next video what it means to really look into the tuck. This young guy has a little bit more of a neutral head position, and he looks back a little early. He's still able to get into a really solid tuck, and he finds his spot at the end of the board, and you can see a really crisp kick out. On this kick out, his knees extend first, and then he slides through before grabbing his hands and lining up for the entry. On 3 meter with this dive, you can probably show it off a little bit more and keep your hands on your thighs a little bit longer. He does a great job with it though. No real complaints there. That's awesome. This next clip is going to show you a little bit more about what it means to look into the tuck. Watch on this takeoff. After he extends off the board, you can see his face. He's looking at his legs, which you'll hear your coach say, into the tuck, or towards the board, or look into your knees. And that doesn't mean you have to look at your knees. You can look past your legs if you split your legs a little bit, or as soon as you get into the tuck, you look up for the water and then the board, whatever spot you need to get the correct kick out. And then just like the young man before, this guy comes out with his knees first to really position the legs in the correct spot for the kick. And then the rest of the body extends back for the water. This kick is so critical on this dive, especially as you get better at using the board and jumping. You'll finish this dive higher, but if you're not kicking out correctly, then you're just gonna wash over every time and you're not gonna have a consistent entry. And this is something that will take a while to develop, but once you have it, or if you just really focus on the knee first come out, that's really what you need to develop for a nice kick out there. And now, obviously, when you're first learning a dive, you're finishing it lower than this guy is. He has a lot of drop time to finish the dive, so he can make it look smooth. If you don't have that much time, you're not going to be able to really stay in the pike position that long, but you still want to think about extending the knees first and squeezing your quads first on the kick out as you're sliding to a more straight position, rather than just this piked position that he has at the peak of this dive. Alright guys, last video here. He has smooth oscillations all the way through takeoff. He doesn't really have any misalignments as he's oscillating, which means he has great balance. He does crow hop. I don't like having my divers crow hop, especially in the early stages. It's dangerous. They don't have the best board work and body awareness on it. A lot of times judges will overlook it at the higher level for whatever reason. I still do not recommend it. Swings the arms through, extends through straight arms at the end of the jump into the C position, lifts up his knees and looks into the tuck while his hands come down for the grab. And then as soon as he connects in, he looks up, he sees the water and probably the tip of the board is where he's looking. And then he kicks, and like we talked about, that knee first kick, extending out, and then he lines up for the entry. He's got really great distance because of the alignment on the start and not pulling too hard with the shoulders on the way up into the dive. He really stays tall, and then he lines it up and he has a really nice knee save on that. The two big things that this guy does is that he comes through the arm circle with a little bit of bent arms. If he can have those a little bit straighter through the arm circle, that would be great. You don't notice it in real time, but when you slow it down, you can tell a little bit more. And then the second thing is on the out, keeping the arms a little bit tighter to the body, because if you accidentally kick a little too high, then having your arms come out too far away from your body will continue the momentum moving over, and it'll be harder to save if it's going over too much. So keeping your arms tight to your body on the come out as you slide to grab will help. But he lines it up great, and hopefully that covers a lot of the common mistakes that people make. So quickly to go over this, we have the tactics here. In the beginning, just getting it off is huge. Having the correct head position, keeping your eyes down at a certain spot on the board. If it's the black line at the end of the board, that's perfect. Or if it's anywhere else that you're looking as you oscillate, keep your eyes there as long as you can while the legs come up to you. Eventually your legs will block where you were looking, and then you'll be looking at your legs or through your legs. Second part is really figuring out that arm circle. It's going to happen on the back dive first and the back jump before it's going to ever happen on the back 1.5. So you got to make sure that you're practicing it there first. Let the arms swing through and try and relax the shoulders as the arms are coming up. I know it feels counterintuitive, like you want to swing harder, which means that you have to use more muscle, but it really means you have to relax more and let the momentum carry your arms through from the bottom of the arm circle all the way back up. And lastly, after you connect into that tuck, look up and try and find the water or the board or wherever you need to look to get the correct kick out position. Then do it about 1,000 more times and you'll have it. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that video, and I'll catch you on the next one, all right?